All right, back to Bill Gates. Bill Gates, and now we're going to learn about the dark side of Bill Gates. You know, Bill Gates has done a lot. As a matter of fact, there's a small series, basically information about Bill Gates and what he's doing now. And the guy has created a nuclear way of doing things, a nuclear fission way that's not dangerous, and nobody cares. So that's kind of sad. He really has thrown his money into doing good things for the world, and people think he's just trying to buy a Nobel Prize, and he definitely deserves one. Although I don't think that's what he's going for. Again, it's a great thing. Watch it on Netflix, and yeah, he just in short basically looks at all the numbers and knows what other people have known, which is there's no possible way that you could power the Earth's needs with solar power and wind power. That's just ridiculous to think so. And there's a lot of people that think, oh no, if we keep pushing it, it'll be like every other technology and become this big thing. And they keep going, no, scientifically that it would take this massive breakthrough. Nuclear power is the only way to do it. And they're like, oh, we can't use nuclear, it's so dangerous. So he's like, okay, well, let's find a safe way. So he basically gives money away to a bunch of people that are smart and says, go fix this. And they did. Yeah, they actually can use depleted uranium, which is basically nuclear power plants waste, and then they shoot radio waves into it, and it heats it, right? Because really, a nuclear power plant is a big steam plant, right? Creating heat, and you're creating steam, and that's turning turbines. And the great thing about it is apparently that you just flip the switch and it goes off, and the reaction quits. Right? The radio waves, you just stop them and the whole thing goes away. Nobody cares. Nobody's listening. It tells you kind of where we're at in our society. But that's not what we're talking about. We're actually talking about the bad Bill Gates. Bill Gates is a very competitive person. And so he starts to create Windows, right? I've said that graphics is the way it's going. And we looked at Windows versions. So in a very real way, he was not somebody that wanted to even be building operating systems. He just got into doing that and ended up like, okay, how can we really utilize this? And so when you come back, right, here's 1985, and there's your computer graphics all the way up and how it kind of moves forward. So Windows way back then, this is really what people don't understand is that Microsoft was beholden to what a system could run. And so when you're talking about, let's look at Windows version 1.1, Windows version 1.0 right here, there's a Wikipedia page, there's a picture of it, if I can find it, get to it. Well, that's really not fancy. That is really, really not. But the problem is we need to try to run this on as many computers as possible. And the whole idea behind this IBM compatible thing is really about making sure I can keep using software for as long as I want to. And so you cannot do what Commodore did or what Apple Macs did, which is basically saying, we're going to go ahead and create an operating system and we'll make sure our hardware can run it. Instead, you have to sell this to a bunch of people. They're going to come and buy this. Right? This is Windows 3.0, which I used pretty heavily. And I needed to run across as many PCs as I possibly can because I got to sell the thing to make money, right? I'm not making a computer. I'm making money off of that, right? So the model's different. Apple has always made the OS, made the hardware, and sold it to people. And that means they can just go, here's a free operating system because you already bought our hardware and that's where we're making the money. Microsoft can't do that. They're not making money off of that hardware. And so they have to make money off of the operating system. And honestly, they've been kind of eating it for a while because of the current situation of Chrome is free, you know, and Chromebooks then don't have to pay for that OS, and Macs are over there making money off of the hardware. And so they can just throw in the OS for free. And we need people to buy Windows 10. And everybody's like, that's too expensive. It's like, this is the only way we can make money. So I don't see them being in the operating systems game as far as PCs go for very much longer. I think PCs are going to continue to shrink I don't mean just in size, but you're going to continue to have other devices that you use. And as we move away from this old technology, which is Mac OS and Windows, whatever, as we move away from that older technology with new generations of people coming out, then they'll have less and less need for those. They'll still need a server system. So by the time you hit the 90s, Apple realizes something really important. And I'll talk about that in a whole article basically that I've written. And that importance is if we control the data, we can control the people. Meaning, if they use Word and we make it hard for them to get their documents out of Word and put it into something else, more people will just end up having to buy Word because they're like, I don't know how to send this. Here's the Word file. And then somebody who's got Wordperfect's like, this isn't working right. And then they just get Word because they get frustrated. Right? That's tended to be the way they went. I was actually working in networking at the time, and we used the big dog. The big dog was Novell, and their server wasn't super easy to set up, but once you got it set up, you never had to worry about it. And the client software was so nice and so easy. Every time an update came out with Microsoft, it would break the networking client and you wouldn't be able to attach to the network. And then a couple of days later, Novell would release a fix for it. Geez, I wonder what was happening there, right? It was pretty easy for me to tell, but I'd been watching Microsoft do their deal for a while, that what was really going on is that Microsoft was making it incompatible. They'd find something to change, and then that way Novell would have to change their things. And then what would people think? I'm so sick of Novell. How come every time I do an update, Novell just screws it up, right? And they would go with Microsoft. Now, that's not the total reason, but that was part of the scenario. And you actually have an assignment, watch a video about what Microsoft did to digital research, DOS, and you'll understand what I'm saying. And so what happens is Microsoft builds this empire. This is a good enough thing. And then finally, when Windows 95 comes out, right, that takes over the landscape. So 1995, the Windows 95 release is massive. Now, the competitors at the time, so let's do a little Windows 95. If you've never seen it, decided for some reason to name it at the year it was released. So it's really like Windows, what was it, 7? Would it have been 7? I think so. Anyway, no, Windows 3, 4, 5, Windows 5, I think that's what it was. Anyway, so Windows 95, this is what it looked like. It was pretty user-friendly. The start button, most people are not aware, was an absolute genius thing that they put in the last revision. Like, hey, how do we really help people that have a hard time getting around on computers? The paradigm before was that on a Mac, see, you would have went Macintosh hard drive, click, click. You would have found the program, click, click, and you would have run it. That's pretty easy compared to DOS, right? But this really made it easy. Basically, the program could be anywhere on the C drive, and then it would put a shortcut right here on the start menu, and then you go out to it. Now, obviously, right, you guys know that, and you're like, yeah, that's the way it works. It didn't before then, right? So this was Windows 95. Another big one was IBM. And I want you to notice the similarities here. So they call it IBM Operating Systems 2. And let's take a look at this screen, which is their desktop. Huh, wow, that looks a lot like Windows 95. Yeah, basically what was going on is that Microsoft was working with IBM to make the next operating system, which would be called OS2, Operating System 2. And what IBM was trying to do was rein things in and bring control back to them. And Microsoft was like, we don't want that, right? We gained all this power and control over all these compatible PCs. We don't really want to help you do that. And so eventually they end up having a fight and they split into two. And Microsoft takes their technologies that they were working on and makes Windows 95, and IBM takes their technologies and makes OS2. I'm going to tell you flat out, hands down, OS2 was a better operating system. It was tons more stable. It was a much better operating system, but again, it did not get the time of anybody's attention because nobody got the option to put it on. If you wanted to put OS2 on, you would have gone out, bought your computer that now came with Windows 95 for free, and said, I want to put OS2 on here, bought OS2 for $40 to $60, and then put that on your computer. That's what you would have had to do yourself. Come on. You know, a standard user is not going to do it. Am I going to do it? Oh, heck yeah, because I love operating systems and love messing with them. You will notice that they actually have this thing that they call a dock. Right? So this was their start menu at the bottom, and that was very typical because, again, if you go back to Next OS, which was a Unix-based system, then you see a dock, and that dock is over here on the side. Right? Same kind of principle. So this dock idea is coming around, and Apple keeps it, right? They actually, well, I'll talk about that later. So something else that came out was BOS. I don't know why it's called BOS. It was really pretty operating system though. You could put a dock on the side, and this is what it looked like. That's now an open source thing that is under Haiku, is what they call that. Then you could get in all these, and you could run them on your system, and they would run any DOS program you wanted them to run. But they wouldn't run Windows programs, right? So once Windows 95 hits, then you start having Windows 95 only programs, and you're not going to be able to run that here. Now, the way that IBM got around it, tried to, is they would actually include a whole copy of Windows in their system. So you could run all of the Windows, operate all the Windows stuff, and also run theirs at the same time, which was fantastic. And apparently, I never did that, but apparently it really worked well and did not crash as much as Windows did. But again, it didn't matter because people were not getting that option. So that's the point where when you start looking at these and you start talking about, well, which one was better, Microsoft's Windows was really at the bottom of the list. And I praise Windows 95 for what it did. It did a ton of cool stuff, but it was not the best operating system out there. But they won because they mainly kicked everybody else out of the race. I have you look at DR-DOS, but there's also something that the same guy made, Gem, sorry. I think everybody's thinking along the same lines. They also made Gem OS, the Gem desktop. So the same people, that's not a really good picture, made a graphical desktop that was really awesome, but no one ever really knew about it. They never really got the opportunity. Now that's always very tragic, and that's really why I'm talking about this, is because when you look around today and you look at how businesses behave, you have to start understanding that, are they doing that because there's a technical reason to do it, or are they maintaining control? I had a student in class that absolutely loved Google, and so every time I talked bad about Google, he really took an offense to it. But I use this as an example. I was like, Google Docs, I used that early on. I was never totally impressed with it, but that's because I know how to use Word and I know how to use Pages, and both of those products are so much better, even in their web form. But a lot of people use Google Docs because that's what they used in high school. And so I said, Google Docs, you used to, not joking, you used to just go up to File, and then you would go to Save As. And then in Google Docs, it would say, oh, you want to save it as a Word document? Would you like to save it as a PDF? And boom, it's done. It is not that way now, right? I invite you to go into your Google Docs and save something and say, I want this out of your system, and put it here. And you'll notice, and I said that in class, and they're like, oh, well, no, what's easy? And the kid started trying to do it. And then I watched him go through it, and then finally he didn't respond. He didn't say, oh, that was only 5 steps. It's just like, wow, that is really stupid that it takes that long to be able to get that done. Why did they do that? They don't have to. Well, they don't really want you out of their system. Microsoft was doing the same things, right? They're using any kind of technology advantage they could to keep you away from getting out of their ecosystem. So they launched Windows 95 with Office 95. And they eventually end up getting sued over this and winning. But you know how the court systems are. It takes so long that it doesn't matter. So they actually they had a really good product. And most people don't know that Word and Excel were both Mac products that they ported to Windows. So because of what you could do on a Mac, Microsoft made some really cool stuff for the Mac. And so then they stopped making it for the Mac and they put it here. Always liked this. This was always really cool. So there's Microsoft Office for Windows 95. Not joking. Windows 95 released 2 days later. Microsoft Office for 95 released. And what they were doing behind the scenes is because they own the OS, they would feed over the newest updates to the Office team. So the Office team could get that stuff ready so that when they would both basically be released at the same time. Now, here's the big Office, right? Office products were what you were using. Let's just say that. Back then, you didn't have an internet. You didn't care that you didn't have an internet, and you were using spreadsheets and documents and little databases and stuff like that. That's the reason you had a computer. So the big one then was Wordperfect. So here's Wordperfect for Windows. Looks like it's an XP model. And of course, their version doesn't come out for 6 months or something like that, or maybe even a year. Why did it take that long? Well, they're not getting that information. You can still buy it by now. They weren't getting that information from Microsoft. So Microsoft is unfairly giving their team an advantage. The other big one at the time, right? I talked about Lotus 123. Gosh, it was Lotus. We'll just put Lotus Office. I can't remember what it's called. And so here's Lotus Office. I used that one. It was really had some cool stuff like this sidebar. And really had a Lotus Symphony, that's what it's called. And so the same thing with them. The 123 and Wordperfect owned the market. Windows 95 comes out, and within 2 years, not nobody, but almost everybody's not using Lotus 123, and they're not using Wordperfect because Office 95 is right there ready for them to use. And a lot of systems, especially if you bought a halfway decent system from Dell, HP, Compaq, Gateway, they actually came with Microsoft Office for free. And so once they gained that market share, then they started to lock things down with, oh, we're going to change this file format, so it's hard for you to open it. We're going to change this, it's hard for you to open it. And they did that kind of game to keep control over what they did. And that was Microsoft in the 90s. I remember reading articles of, well, as a matter of fact, just before the internet, there was a big hullabaloo about MS Money. Right, so these programs that are going to tie into your bank account and help you finance things, help you see finances better. No web pages, guys. Right, there's no web pages back then, so this was a big deal. I know it's like, well, who cares? But this was a huge deal back then, and this was a big deal. This was all over the tech news that Microsoft Money is coming in, and who is their competitor? Quicken, right? Quicken was the big dog. They had that market. And I remember reading articles that said, well, Microsoft Money is an inferior product, but we suggest you get it because they will end up owning the market, just like they did with Windows, just like they did with Office. Just, in other words, why should I buy this when it's inferior? Well, it's inevitable to start using it because it's inevitable. Wow, that's not a good reason to buy anything because it's inevitable. And so really, Microsoft was this juggernaut that just, I will take over. I'll take over the server market. I'll take over everything. And I won't do it with my products better than yours. I will do it with making it good enough and then causing you any trouble I can so that you just get shoved out of the way. Right? That was Microsoft of the 90s. All right, that is it for the Microsoft tale, and probably almost totally for them. There's only one more thing to mention. The decline of Microsoft. So I hope you took good notes, and I do hope you enjoyed the video. I know people that don't enjoy history usually don't enjoy these videos too much, but I usually have most of the class that's like, hey, that's pretty cool, never knew that. So thank you very much for watching.